So Donkey Kong is an icon in the world of gaming. While I like Bowser a lot, Donkey Kong was Mario's original villain back in the day. Yeah, the arcade games were wild. Mario wasn't saving a princess, he was just trying to save his girlfriend, Pauline, from Donkey Kong. Originally supposed to be a Popeye the Sailor game, Nintendo's big breakout into the gaming market didn't actually get licensed to use Popeye. This is probably the most important event in gaming history, as now characters like Mario and Donkey Kong are hitting the scene. Could you just imagine Popeye being the face of gaming? Oh jeez. Anyway, Nintendo was eventually sued by Warner Brothers as Donkey Kong and King Kong were very similar. Like, really similar. Luckily, Jack Kirby, yes, the very loyal Kirby was named after, was there to save the day. Meanwhile, Donkey Kong was so popular in the arcades that he spawned a sequel or two. And spawned is the key word for the second game. Oh, that's right. I'm talking about the infamous, the missing, Donkey Kong Jr. Instead of playing as Mario, he's the bad guy this time around. I suppose I could have named this Sauron Takes on Mario, but that would only account for one game. Regardless, DK Jr. is indeed in the sequel. I actually played the Game & Watch version of this game when I was a kid. Not sure how I gained access to it. I was younger. I think 5 at the time. Anyway. This is my first memory of Donkey Kong Jr. Honestly, I rarely played this game growing up. Hell, I think I played Donkey Kong Jr. Math more. You know, Donkey Kong Jr. Math is the edutainment game that released on the NES. But I played it more on Animal Crossing, you know, the first release to come to the US. Neat. Then there's the most obscure Donkey Kong game, Donkey Kong 3. Most people probably didn't even know this game existed unless, you know, Nintendo keeps reminding people every so often. My first run-in with this game was actually a Smash Bros. Melee trophy of Stanley here. Eventually I'd try the NES version thanks to my Switch. This is also how I ended up playing the arcade versions of these as well. You can get all the arcade versions of these games on the Switch for a bit of a smaller price. Naturally, the arcade versions are considered the best versions for most of these games. But the NES ports are still better than some ports. Donkey Kong and many of the other arcade games that we're talking about today have been made and ported to many different consoles, due to the NES not really being a thing at the time of the arcade releases. As such, there are some Atari and Commodore style ports for many of the consoles that predate the NES, so that's fun. Most of them were pretty bad though. Hell, I hear Atari made the Commodore versions purposely bad, as Atari had the rights to all the home console versions in 1983. Regardless, one can't ignore the impact Donkey Kong has had on the arcade scene since the 80s. So I can't ignore the games either, now can I? We have to look at these games before I can get to the rest of the month of Donkey Kong. Marathon of Donkey Kong. So let's do it. Let's take on, well, Donkey Kong. So in the original arcade version of Donkey Kong kidnaps Mario's girlfriend. Yep, Mario decides to go save her. So a couple of details. The gorilla is named Donkey Kong, obviously. But what's weird is that he's Mario's pet? Yeah, it's implied Mario actually owns the gorilla. Also, Mario doesn't quite have his name yet, as Miyamoto had yet to meet Mario Segel, to my knowledge. So he's known as Jumpman here in this game. Anyway, Mario has to save Pauline from his own pet gorilla. Eventually, he does defeat Donkey Kong and save the girl after about 4 levels. Donkey Kong plays as an older platformer, with Mario being able to jump across platforms. However, Mario isn't as athletic as he will be in Super Mario Bros. Mario also can't, you know, drop too much vertically when it comes to his jumps, or he'll end up falling to his death. If you take any type of damage, you die in this game. Mario has no endurance at all. If he takes one hit, he dies. Done. You jump too soon to the barrel and die. You hit a spring, you die. You eat pie, you die. You drop too far, you die. You get the point? Okay. There is a hammer power-up that you can get, but it doesn't last very long and you can't jump while using it, so it only exists to really boost your score. There are 4 levels in the game. 25 meters is the first stage, with Mario climbing up girders and jumping over barrels to get to Donkey Kong. There's a fire guy here too, thanks to an old oil drum, but he isn't much of a threat unless you're playing on harder difficulties. The second stage, 50 meters, which mysteriously is the most cut stage in any of the ports, has evil pies. Ooh. They're going to be dropping into a burning oil drum for some reason too, by the way. Are they poisonous? Maybe they're cement? I'm not sure. You dodge them on the conveyor belts and jump up to meet Kong once again. The third stage, also known as 75 meters, is the hardest on your first run, in my opinion. The stage they decided to put in Smash Brothers as well. There's a lot of platforms, possible falls, and nasty springs that are very difficult to dodge as they're really, really fast moving. After 75 meters, you reach 100 meters, the final level. You dodge fire dudes and jump over pegs holding all the steel girders together. Once you remove all the pegs, the boss fight is done, and Donkey Kong lands on his head after all of that. He's defeated. Then the cycle repeats on harder difficulties. The point of an older arcade game is to simply build the biggest score you can, but beating levels is a good way to build up score. Jumping and destroying barrels, as well as collecting items of Pauline's that she just kind of dropped, also helps this out. Overall, Donkey Kong is a fun time if you got time to kill. Once you get used to the gameplay, it's fun to burn through Donkey Kong and get that high score. So in Donkey Kong Jr., you actually play as Donkey Kong's son, who's also named Donkey Kong. He's the future protagonist of the country games, to be honest. Yeah, the original Donkey Kong becomes Cranky Kong. Anyway, Mario has recaptured Donkey Kong and is taking him away. DK Jr. sets out to save his dad from the vicious Mario, who's using a bunch of other animals to defeat the poor child. Regardless, eventually DK Jr. does save his old man through a lot of pain and effort. Yep, I don't like this game, to be honest. This game is difficult in kind of the wrong ways. Like Mario, Jr. here is really heavy when it comes to his jumps, and when it comes to grabbing vines, the controls are a bit finicky. He jumps slowly unless grabbing onto two different vines. The way it works is basically when you're holding onto two different vines, you have more threats coming at you, but you're moving faster. When you're holding onto one vine, you're slower, but you're safer anyway. Now that being said, Junior can slide down vines pretty fast, but that's a good way to fall off the shorter vines and die. Also, much like Mario, Junior's endurance really sucks. He has just as much fall damage potential, and he can only take one hit before death. This isn't the bad part, though. No, it's one of the stages. And believe it or not, I actually like all but one of the stages. The first stage, Vines, is pretty standard, getting you used to climbing and dodging baddies. There's some RNG, though, patterns you can't possibly predict that can come and wreck your day. This did happen in the first game, too. However, in the first game, there were ways around the RNG of barrels sliding down ladders, and in Vines, there are also escape routes. However, the second level, Jump Board, is an absolute pain in the ass. The platforming is very narrow, and Mario sends out deadly birds. These things have a pattern, but they don't always follow it, and since DK Jr. is slow, he has the shittiest time dodging these assholes. What's worse, they drop eggs at certain points, making them hard to dodge even when you aren't anywhere nearby. The RNG factor is frustrating and literally, in my opinion, makes this the hardest stage in the game. The closer to the birds you climb, the harder it gets. The third stage, Mario's Hideout, is also incredibly hard, but I find it less frustrating and fairer overall. You have to dodge sparks and some tricky timing, but once you get to the top, you end up getting to the last level, which is shockingly easy. The chain level is just you dodging birds and crocs while pushing up key blocks on chains. The thing is, there's plenty of room to maneuver. Yeah, due to the sheer amount of chains, you have tons of room to maneuver around and dodge things. Eventually, with enough time and patience, you will save DK. It's actually kind of impressive how open-ended that whole thing is, But by the time you get there, you're easily skilled enough to just beat the final level. Overall, the game is far harder than the last one. But while the game is a lot more unforgiving, I still say Donkey Kong Jr. is still a fun time. Yeah, it's rough, and yeah, I don't like it as much as the other two, but it's not terrible by any means. And now for Donkey Kong 3. Yep, this is a game. Donkey Kong broke into a greenhouse, and the owner, Stanley, just wants DK out of there. That's it. There isn't really any ending here either. Unlike the other games, there isn't much of an ending. Once you remove DK, he ends up in another room. You win the stage by clearing him out. He does happen to piss off a few bug hives nearby, and these bugs will kill Stanley very quickly. Ironic, since you're supposed to be keeping him off your plants. Yeah, Stanley himself is way more vulnerable than any of his plants from what I can tell. Overall, though, his weapon is fitting. He has bug spray. You can take out the bugs with his weapon in what is essentially a platforming shooter game, yeah. You blast bugs away to defend yourself. Your real target is the big ape up top. You can't move on unless you blast him enough times up the ass. I guess poison up the butt isn't very pleasant. Regardless, that's how you end the level and start again. The level platforms get bigger until the cycle restarts. It's an arcade like more than the other ones at this point, which... yeah, there isn't really a true ending overall. You just keep playing the game and it just kind of gets harder. It's fun, but not as grandiose as the other two. Still a fun time though. So yeah, Donkey Kong's overall arcade appearances was mostly as a villain, and once as a damsel in distress. Huh, interesting history. I think if you have to play one of these games, Donkey Kong, the original, is your best bet here. DK Jr. and DK3 aren't quite as fun in my opinion. DK Jr. is just too challenging and a quarter goblin, while DK3 is just for that high score and not really much else. Still challenging and can be fun in shorter bursts. Donkey Kong, though, there's a beginning and an end to the experience, or it continues on like an arcade game of old. It's a special blend of challenging and fun that I just think works overall. Any of these games are fun time though, at least for a little bit. Just avoid some of the other versions. The NES versions are fine, but the arcade versions are king, unless there's a remake on the Game Boy I haven't played or something. Oh boy. Actually, that's more of its own beast in a lot of senses, so next time we meet, I'll be reviewing the supposed remake of Donkey Kong on the Game Boy. I hope you guys don't mind black and white though. Regardless, that's all I have to discuss for this video. As always, like, subscribe, comment, hit the live bell button for absolute perfect notification process. It'll come up on your phone, your computer, everything. Follow my content, help my channel out as always. Take care, my minions. Bye-bye.